Beyond visual range combat in modern warfare is incredibly complex, and that complexity is modeled fairly well in commercially available simulators. It can be pretty overwhelming too. So how do you get better at it? Besides the obvious answer of practice, there are 7 things you can do right now to help out. So let's take a look at them. Now I know a lot of you are like me and practice flying solo. It's always good to practice, but one thing you'll notice right away the first time you fly with other players is just how different and difficult it can be. And you might be left wondering why. After all, it should be easier with more help, right? Well, not necessarily. Let's go over why that is. When you have a scenario like this where it's just you flying solo against one or more AI enemy aircraft, you have some things going for you, even if you're outnumbered. One is that you know that every contact on your radar screen and every black speck you see out in the distance is all a valid target. There's no need to worry that you might accidentally fire on a friendly. Another advantage is that you have 100% situational awareness on all friendly forces because you are all the friendly forces. You know exactly what your team is doing and where they are at all times. But the moment you add another teammate, this all changes. Even if it's 2 of you against one enemy, you're going to have some challenges to overcome, like when you see 2 radar contacts on your screen. You need to incorporate positive identification into your plan, otherwise you'll risk shooting your friend accidentally. Now I've covered the fundamentals of working with the wingman in the Air Combat Maneuvering series, but to really understand it, you need to spend some time practicing with the friend. And to do that effectively, you'll need a BVR plan, which is our second tip. Going into a BVR engagement without a solid plan is an invitation for disaster. If your entire plan is acquire a target, shoot the target, and evade return fire, then you don't have a real plan. Against an equally skilled and equipped adversary, the winner in this case is determined purely by luck. And even then, it's with significant losses. To get a better outcome, you want to spell out certain details with your team during the briefing, like when you will take shots, how you will sort out targets, and when you will take evasive action. These 3 videos spell out how to do that. Now, if you're worried that this all sounds too complicated, just realize that the following 3 lines cover a basic BVR plan. It's short and to the point, and it's explained in the 3 videos that I'll link in the description. Following a plan like this can shift the odds in your favor, especially if your opponent's entire plan is acquire, shoot, and evade. But one common problem I see even with people that have briefed the plan is the following scenario. After the first salvo, they completely forget the plan and fall back on acquire, shoot, evade. Then things tend to fall apart. But we can overcome this with our next tip. A good BVR plan will incorporate a way to stay out of the enemy's weapon engagement zone. Typically, this is done by turning away from danger in a maneuver called an out. This is also when newer pilots tend to stop following anything resembling a plan and fall back on acquire, shoot, evade. Now there are a couple reasons for this. One is that a fighter's primary BVR sensor is the radar mounted in the aircraft's nose, and that's no longer pointed at the enemy to provide situational awareness. This is also the time when enemy missiles are in the air, which can cause people to forget about anything except survival. But if you want to win, you need to do more than just survive. After the first salvo has been fired by both sides, the geometry of the battlefield will most likely change as everyone maneuvers. You can use this time in the out to plan your next step. Use the SA tools you have at your disposal, like data link and radio calls from a controller, to figure out where everyone is at. Then you can assign targets and re-attack as a group. When you don't have a plan, you can easily find yourself in a situation like this. During a BVR scenario I was observing, the group was following a pre-briefed plan where they would fire and execute an out before entering the enemy's weapon engagement zone. This worked well for the initial salvo, but they had no plan for the re-attack. During the out, one of the hostile fighters turned to the side instead of directly away, and this threw off the friendly team. Their plan revolved around the enemy turning straight back towards them. The team ended up looking here instead of down here, and all they found was one enemy. All of them fired on that one enemy while ignoring this one off to the side because there was no plan and no coordination after the first salvo. Then the enemy flanked them and decimated their team. What should have been a decisive victory ended up as a disaster because their plan didn't extend past the first shot. So use the time on the out to build and communicate a new plan for the follow-on attacks. To do this effectively, you need good situational awareness, and that leads us to our next tip. Every fighter is going to have its own set of specific systems that need to be configured correctly for BVR. This can include setting a master mode, activating a helmet display, or displaying a bullseye reference in a convenient place. Explaining them all for every fighter is beyond the scope of this video, but there is one thing that should be done on every airframe that has this feature available. It's centering the SA display. This screen will have a different name depending on the aircraft, but whatever it's called, it will provide situational awareness or SA to the pilot. When the display has the option to center the view on your aircraft or depress it to show more area ahead of the fighter, it can be tempting to go for the depressed view. That view shows a lot of airspace in front of the aircraft. It might seem like a good idea to have more room since you're going for range in BVR, but it comes at a cost. When you're executing an out, you lose all this space behind your aircraft. And if you're trying to plan your next move, you need to see the enemy on the screen. You want that space. So center the SA display. And if you need extra space for your attacks, then you can increase the range on your radar display on a second screen. Not every fighter has this capability, but if there are two screens and a centerable SA display, take advantage of it. It really does help out. BVR combat wouldn't be possible without radar and data links, but these tools aren't perfect. Sometimes you end up in a situation like this, where you have a hostile contact on one or both of these systems, but in reality, this is what that contact looks like. This still gives a radar return even when it's technically destroyed. At the other end of that spectrum, we could get this. Our scope is blank, but in reality there's an enemy hidden in ground clutter, and if we're not careful, it could strike when it's too late to do anything about it. There are two things you can do to help here. One is to incorporate the RWR into your crosscheck. If your radar and SA display are clean, but your RWR shows an enemy fighter's radar, then listen to the RWR. And if you aren't sure if a radar contact is still in the fight, then treat it like it is. Build some range and re-engage from a safe distance. And speaking of range, let's talk about a range that's important to BVR. In an earlier video, we talked about how minimum abort range, or MAR, is the last opportunity to turn away from an enemy before entering that enemy's weapon engagement zone. So you might feel comfortable flying right up to MAR in a fight. But there's one situation where this might not work, and you could still get hit by an enemy weapon. MAR is specific to an enemy's weapon, but it's also calculated to the parameters of the turn you make to get out of danger. So if you have a MAR that works for a 4G turn at Mach 1, it might get you shot down if you change those parameters. Let's say you go for a higher speed to increase the effective range of a missile shot. Now your turn radius just got wider, and you could end up inside the missile's WES. Just remember, if you increase speed or decrease G, then you need a new MAR that's farther out. For our final tip, I want to share something that will help you get more comfortable with the radio calls and procedures you need to remember for BVR. When you're in the cockpit, there are a lot of things vying for your attention, especially during BVR. Now add in teammates that you have to keep track of and coordinate shots with, and it's easy to get swept away in a sea of information. Wouldn't it be nice if you could practice this coordination without all the distractions? You can. It's called chair flying, and just like the name implies, you do it by sitting in a chair and not in a cockpit. This is a real-world technique used to test student pilots before they even climb into a plane. It works by verbally walking through what you're going to do before you do it for real. This works for BVR too. Simply walk through each phase like we've talked about and say your radio calls out loud. You can do this over voice chat with your friends, and you should easily be able to tell what everyone is doing so long as everyone is using good communication. I have a video on BVR comms here if you want to know more about how this works. So if you're having a tough time as a team, then I highly recommend chair flying before your next BVR session. I bet you'll see an improvement. Now I want to circle back to our first tip, practicing with the team. Even if it's only one other person, it's going to help tremendously. You can only get so much from a video, but the real learning comes from doing it yourself. Air combat is hectic, even in a sim, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. The only way around it is to exercise your skills the way athletes exercise their muscles. To help you do this, I'm going to continue this series by showing you how the U.S. Air Force used simulators to train pilots for BVR. And then I'm going to show you how you can replicate that training in DCS. So I hope to see you come back for those videos, and thanks for watching.